Okay, let's get straight to it. The KOSPI hitting a record high, that's noise. The real signal is a massive, targeted capital rotation into what we're calling physical AI. Global funds completely sidestepped the wider Korean market to hit three specific hardware names. This is a clear front run of the US robotics and semiconductor session, and we are tracking that flow. So, on the surface, this is what everyone sees. The KOSPI index pushing to a new all-time high. Looks like a classic bullish signal for the entire region, right? But this is where most analysis stops, and it's exactly where our work begins. Because that headline, it's a total misdirection. Anyone who's just tracking the index has already missed the incredibly precise capital deployment that was happening right underneath the surface. We're focused on the flow, not the froth. Now, this is the real catalyst. It wasn't some dry economic report. It was a hardware reveal at CES, specifically Hyundai's Boston Dynamics pulling the curtain back on the next-generation Atlas robot. That single event is what triggered the structural shift in capital we're tracking tonight. And that brings us to the core signal for tonight's U.S. session, the physical AI pivot. What we're witnessing is a fundamental move away from software-based AI and into the hardware that lets AI actually interact with the physical world. So, here's the crucial part. The money isn't just buying a car company, and it's not just buying a robotics firm. It's buying the entire supply chain. This chain, this nexus between a Korean industrial giant, its top-tier U.S. robotics subsidiary, and the core U.S. semiconductor provider, that has become the new center of gravity for capital. All right, let's dive into the data. We're going to look at the forensic evidence of this capital flow. The numbers confirm the thesis, and there's really zero ambiguity here. First, check out this decoupling. The KOSPI, which is Korea's index of huge industrial hardware companies, rallied. But at the same time, the KOSDAQ, which is the tech-heavy, more speculative index, it fell sharply. This tells you it wasn't a broad risk-on party. No way. It was a targeted acquisition of industrial capacity. Smart money was actively selling speculative tech to buy physical hardware. Now, the scale of this move, it's clearly institutional. Over 1.2 trillion Korean won in foreign capital just poured in. This isn't retail FOMO. This is a high-conviction, strategic bet being placed by major global funds. And that sentiment translates directly to the U.S. market. And this heat map shows you exactly where every dollar of that capital went. The green isn't spread out, it is laser-focused. A massive 13.8% surge in Hyundai, the robotics parent company, along with huge inflows into SK Hynix and Samsung. Why them? Because they are the two most critical memory suppliers for AI hardware. This was a surgical strike. So what's the mechanism here? Why these specific companies? It's all about connecting the dots, the nodes of the global hardware supply chain. We call it the hardware nexus. Let's clearly define the term that's driving this entire shift. Physical AI. Up until now, AI has mostly lived in the digital world. Now, it's being embedded into robots to perform actual physical labor. This transition, it requires a quantum leap in hardware, which is exactly why capital is rotating out of pure software and into the companies that actually build things. The connection is incredibly direct. On the left, you've got the Atlas robot. For that thing to function on its own, it needs an insane amount of processing power. And that power is fed by something called high bandwidth memory, or HBM. It's the critical bottleneck. And on the right, that's the Samsung HBM chip that provides that exact bandwidth. One literally cannot function without the other. And here, this is the bridge to the US market. Korean suppliers like SK Hynix and Samsung absolutely dominate the manufacturing of the HBM that US leaders like Nvidia are completely dependent on. So a massive buy order in Seoul for these memory producers acts as a leading indicator, a tell for future demand in the US semiconductor sector. You could say Korea's market is the canary in the coal mine for the NASDAQ. So that brings us to the execution plan for the US session. The signal from Asia is loud and clear. Now let's define the triggers and the tactical price levels for tonight's trading. We're tracking two primary triggers today. First, at 8 a.m. Eastern, the CES keynote. If we see a high-performance demo, that validates the commercial timeline. That's when you watch Nvidia, Tesla, and ABB. Then at 9 a.m., Jensen Huang of Nvidia speaks. Any mention of rising demand for robotics could trigger a re-rating of the entire memory sector's forward earnings. That's the one to watch.
All right, here's the execution framework. It's simple. The bull case is active as long as NASDAQ futures hold above 25,850. That is the key support level we are watching. If it holds, the target becomes 26,350. Now the bear case, the bull trap, triggers if we see a sustained break below 25,500. If that support level is breached, the signal from Korea is invalidated. And at that point, all long positions are canceled and we stand by for new data.
So based on that whole supply chain linkage, these are the tickers on our primary watch list for tonight. Nvidia, Tesla, Micron, Broadcom, and ABB. They are the most direct U.S. proxies for the capital rotation that we just detected in the Korean session. And that leaves us with the final question. Are we just witnessing the very beginning of a multi-year supercycle where physical AI becomes the new center of gravity for global capital? One that could re-rate the entire industrial hardware sector? The data from tonight's U.S. session will give us our next clue. Stay sharp.